Hello everyone, this is Tetrafolium, and I'm here today to tell you that this is not Pokemon FireRed Power Plant, this is the Pokemon Mansion, of course, because the first generation of Pokemon was extremely good about making new tracks for every single area. This is one of my gripes with FireRed and LeafGreen's soundtrack, and of course, it wouldn't be a Tetrafolium video, well, I guess it could be, but it, it would be a Tetrafolium video if I start talking about music rather than talking about Pokemon. In any case, this is Weezing, the Poison type's strongest soldier in ADV, but you might be wondering, why is my little profile picture so shifted over to the left? Well, that's because it's not just a video about the strongest soldier for Poison type, it's about the strongest soldier for Weezing itself. Weezing Fan 64 has been commenting on many of my videos, asking about a Weezing video and telling me about the lunch that they are enjoying, or dinner, or whatever time of day it is for them when they're watching. And this has been a long time coming. This is probably one of my most requested Pokemon to do, even outside of Weezing Fan 64. So, I mean, shoutouts to Weezing Fan though, for being diligent and wanting to get some Weezing on the tapes, and I think I did a decent job with this, so hopefully this is good. Sorry to put myself up and set you up for disappointment later if I happen to not do a good job, but in any case, we will move on. So, the viability rankings has Weezing at number 45, just below Blaziken and Quagsire and Marowak. Just above Ludicolo, though. Coincidentally, all Pokemon that I've done videos on, so I guess that means what? Glalie gonna have to be next at some point? I don't know. We're fanning out from Blaziken. In any case, Weezing, really interesting. As far as like poison types are concerned, it's only outranked by Gengar and I believe Venusaur. And those are Pokemon that have some kind of, because of their dual type, have some interesting sort of interplay with the poison type. Weezing is like the most platonic ideal of a poison type, especially because of its ability helping it even more with its typing. But we'll talk more about that in a moment. In any case, comment question for this video is, what are you doing while you're watching this video? I mean, Weezing Fan 64 seems to always be eating, or playing card games, which is also cool. But I'm interested what you guys are doing. Probably you just have this on while you're driving home from work, or maybe possibly while you're doing work, or maybe you're also eating. You're on your lunch break. I know that I get comments about that all the time. So, but in any case, happy Weezing Wednesday if this comes out on a Wednesday, or if you watch this on a Wednesday. And if you don't watch this on a Wednesday, well, happy Weezing Wednesday anyway. The poison type. Is it the most underrated defensive type in the game? I'm maybe saying it could be. Just like any great politician, I have a wishy-washy sort of conclusion. But poison balances a lot of really common weaknesses with some really common resistances. Well, I guess I shouldn't say really common. Ground is a pretty common one. Earthquake is probably the most common coverage move in the format. I don't have any statistics that back that up, but my gut feeling is that it probably is, because most of the good physical attackers that can run Earthquake do. So, we'll keep that in mind. Also, Earthquake is just very common. It's on a lot of Pokemon. But Psychic is a little less common. As far as like stab types go, Psychic is one of the most commonly dropped. Like things like Starmie, Jirachi, sometimes even Celebi will not run Psychic. I mean, granted, Jirachi and Celebi certainly run Psychic a good amount, and Starmie runs it from time to time, but a lot of times the psychic types are favoring other coverage moves over their psychic. So it's not the worst weakness to have. If you're going to have one, psychic is not a bad pick. But as far as resistances go, look at that. Fighting, poison, grass, bug, and ignore fairy. That doesn't exist in this generation. So yeah, bug and grass are two of the most common hidden power types. So you can switch in on a lot of Pokemon that are going for a coverage hidden power to hit something else. Now, I don't know if I necessarily would recommend that all the time, given that most of the Pokemon that are doing something like that are usually like an electric type that need that hidden power coverage to help them. And electric, while it's not strong against poison type per se, poison type isn't particularly great at taking electric moves either, so, or at least many of the poison type Pokemon in any case. So I don't know if I would say wholesale that that's a great thing to do, but bug, very commonly used on physical attackers in conjunction with fighting moves, normal moves, sometimes rock and ground moves as well. So it's actually not so bad to switch into a hidden power bug on prediction, especially if it's against a fighting type Pokemon who can't hit you with their stab very well. And then this is really good because you can have Pokemon like Swampert, Celebi, or Tyranitar that have these ×4 weaknesses to the types that poison resists, and then use the poison type teammate to pivot. So that could be an interesting sort of application. We don't see it very much in ADV because there are not a lot of great poison types, but maybe I'll give you an idea of a poison type to use in this video, because as you know, a Tetrafolium video is never just about the Pokemon that is in the title. It's going to be about a bunch of things that are related to that Pokemon. But the question is, why don't we see a lot of poison types in OU? And I think the answer is because while it might be one of the better defensive types, it possibly is like top 3 defensive types. It's arguably, or honestly, inarguably, the worst offensive type. So again, forget Fairy, that doesn't exist. You're super effective to Grass. That's it. That's the only type. And if you were going to pick one type to be super effective against, Grass cannot be a very high priority. There are not very many good Grass types in the game. There are only 2 that are ranked OU. Celebi and Breloom, and Celebi will hit a poison type back with a stab, super effective psychic, which, while sometimes it doesn't run psychic, of all the psychic types, Celebi is probably one of the most likely to run psychic. I guess maybe Claydol's a little bit more likely, but, you know, Claydol's kind of weak, so it's not, and it also has ground stab to hit poison types, so that's not the most consequential thing in the world. Celebi's psychic, though, is pretty consequential to the vast majority of poison types. You do have some other notable grass types like Venusaur and Sceptile, maybe Jumpluff as well, but Sceptile, Jumpluff are pretty uncommon. Venusaur is also pretty uncommon, but Venusaur is not weak to poison by virtue of the fact that it is a poison type itself. As far as the resistances go, ground and rock, both resisting poison, is not fantastic. A lot of the physical attackers that you would want to switch into with your poison type to wall them are going to be ground and rock types, especially with Weezing. And we'll talk, I mean, you know it has Levitate. I'm not going to be so coy about that anymore. But yeah, not being able to hit them for very much damage with your Sludge Bomb is not great. Also, Poison and Ghost, while those are not super duper consequential types to not be very effective against because there are so few of them in the OU tier. In fact, there's only one Ghost type and one Poison type, but the problem is it's the same Pokemon, which means that Poison type moves are going to be quad resisted by Gengar, which is not at all what you want to see. That means that Gengar actually comes in and takes a physical hit really well, which is rare for Gengar. I shouldn't slander Gengar too much, though. Gengar is quite a good Pokemon. But let's talk about some of the poison types in ADV. So, I have Gengar stats here. You're probably the most familiar with Gengar, and I don't know exactly when the order of all these videos is going to come out, but I may have already posted a video about Gengar, and if not, I probably already announced that it's coming at some point. In any case, these are Gengar's defensive stats, and offensive stats, and speed. So, as you can see, definitely a lot in the special attack and the speed department. Not so much in the other departments, but that's kind of fine because Gengar's got a lot of great defensive qualities thanks to its type and ability that it can kind of make do with, honestly, mediocre to subpar defensive stats. And then, of course, attack is like, if you're going to be a special attacker, you might as well dump your physical attack if you're going to choose one stat to dump. But let's take a look at some of the other poison types, and these are all of them that are ranked UUBL or higher, so we don't really have a great pick of the litter here. I could have talked about Nidoqueen, Nidoking, but instead of kind of, I don't want to say wasting our time talking about Pokemon that are not very good here, you can watch my video on Nidoqueen and even watch Zetz's video talking about both of them if you would like to hear more about those. There are actually a good number of UU poison types, like Quillfish and Vileplume and all that, but I'm getting so sidelined, I just don't want to talk about Crobat. But I guess we can't delay any longer. Let's take a look at the defensive stats first. Surprisingly, Crobat has the highest HP of all the poison types here. Oh, it's kind of spoiled the offensive stats there. Forget that you saw that. In any case, 85 HP, that's not terrible, but that's not great, and also not great for your type if that's like the highest HP. Now, granted, there may be, and I think there probably is, a Pokemon with higher HP that is a poison type, probably Muck, but Muck is UU ranked, so not eligible to be talked about on this slide, because I made the arbitrary rules for this. So, in any case, yeah, that's kind of not great, but Crobat also has 80 defense and 80 Spadef, which makes it kind of a mixed wall, but I would struggle to really call it a wall because, like, 80s is not fantastic defensive stats. This is like a very similar defensive profile to Flygon, and yes, while Flygon runs defensive spreads in ADV OU, it also is immune to both spikes and sand, while Crobat's only immune to spikes, so kind of gets away with having slightly worse stats overall. Also, and I hate to say this, but when I saw Crobat, right, I assumed that, like, its teeth were kind of just, like, in its mouth, but I've seen some models of Crobat, particularly in, like, the 3D games from, like, the Gen 3, Gen 4 era, like, so, like, your Pokemon XD, Pokemon Battle Revolution, stuff like that, where it seems to suggest that, like, Crobat just has, like, a massive overbite, and it's, like, biting over its bottom lip, and I just can't unsee it now that I'm looking at this portrait, and I hate it. It's so ugly when I have to think about it like that. I kind of prefer to think about it as if, like, it's got, like, a Gengar mouth but upside down. But no, like, I don't think that was their intention based on the model, which is very bad news for me. In any case, Weezing has the higher physical defense of all these poison types, where Venusaur has the higher special defense. 100 special defense, pretty good. 120 defense, really good. That puts you in the same sort of conversation as things like Donphan, which is really nice. Although, Weezing does not quite have the HP stat that Donphan does. 65 HP is not fantastic. That is, I think, the same HP stat as Skarmory, though. And Skarmory has, well, 140 defense, so a little bit higher than Weezing. But if Weezing has some other defensive capabilities that Skarmory maybe doesn't, then arguably Weezing could be like in that same discussion as Skarmory. Now, I don't know if I necessarily would put it there because Skarmory's defensive type is godly and Weezing's is pretty good, but I don't know if I'd say godly. And you know, being able to set spikes and all that is also not trivial. But yeah, well, I guess we'll discuss more about that when we talk about the sort of utility that Weezing can offer to your team. In any case, what you need to know about these poison types is that they do have pretty good defensive types by virtue of being poison, but their stats are not always super duper like well aligned with their defensive nature, or at least the type's defensive nature. Venusaur probably does the best at balancing this. I know it's not, I mean, its defense and its HP are kind of in the same ballpark as Crobat, but that extra Spadef is really nice. And then Weezing is a little bit more on the like lopsided end, where it has a lot more physical defense. But I think, as you generally see in Pokemon, you'd rather be a little more lopsided than balanced. Not always true, but that generally tends to work better for certain Pokemon. So now let's talk about offensive stats. And Weezing and Crobat are tied for the highest attack stats at 90. That's actually not bad. Now, granted, because Poison is not a fantastic attacking type, only 90 is going to be a little bit more apparent for these Pokemon than, say, if you had like a mono ground type with a 90 attack stat. But we're never going to complain about 90 attack. Now, what we could complain about is the special attack for these Pokemon. 70 is not good at all for Crobat. That is just not going to help you beat a lot of things that you would like to hit, particularly like your Steel types that would wall the dual stab of Poison and Flying for Crobat. But 85 for Weezing, not fantastic, but not too bad either. You also get like pretty good coverage by virtue of the fact that you're a Gen 1 Pokemon and they decided to give like every elemental TM to Gen 1 Pokemon. Well, except for Ice Beam. If Weezing got Ice Beam, that would be incredible. But it does get Flamethrower, Fire Blast, Thunder, and Thunderbolt, if I'm not mistaken. So you do have some options there if you want to be a special attacking Weezing. And then, of course, Venusaur has a pretty respectable 100. And then 82 attack, not great, but you do get Swords Dance. So if you want to be a physical attacker, then you could do a lot worse than Venusaur. Yeah, you could do Charizard. No, that's a joke. Charizard is probably a little bit better by virtue of the fact that it has Belly Drum as an option, but I digress. And then speed. Crobat is just really fast. 130 speed, phenomenal. Now, what are you doing with that? Like, as compared to your other 130 speed counterparts like Jolteon and Aerodactyl? I mean, not really much. Spamming Sludge Bomb is not nearly as devastating as spamming like Thunderbolt or Rock Slide. But, I mean, it is good to know this, at the very least. Venusaur actually has a pretty surprising speed of 80. That's just as fast as things like Medicham, and I would consider Medicham decently fast. So Venusaur is also decently fast by virtue of that. Although I do think it is a little more incentivized to run more in its defensive stats. You could watch my Weezing, or sorry, you're watching my Weezing video. You could watch my Venusaur video if you would like to see a little bit more about Venusaur. And then Weezing's got a base 60 speed, which is not fantastic. Same as Swampert. And, I mean, we kind of know how slow Swampert is, so Weezing is going to have all that same sort of goodness associated with it. But as a little bit of a bulleted list that summarizes, Gengar is probably the best at being fast utility and a special attacker. Venusaur is probably your best for bulky offense. at least concentrated in itself and its kit. It also has a little bit more longevity thanks to the fact that it gets synthesis, although synthesis is not the ideal recovery move in this generation. It's still better than nothing, and also Leech Seed is just nice as well. Weezing is going to be your best physical wall, thanks to its really high base physical defense and access to moves that we're going to discuss in greater detail later, like Will-O-Wisp. And Crobat's fast. I mean, I don't really have much else to say about Crobat. It's not really even close to viable in OU. I that's not to say I've never seen it and I've never seen it win games. But like, it's definitely not an easy Pokemon to win with. It does not have the traits that a OU-worthy Pokemon generally would. So let's talk about Weezing's more unique defensive traits. Some of these traits are not exactly unique, but not very many Pokemon get them. Like Gengar, Weezing has the ability Levitate, which negates one of its only two weaknesses, but I guess I should say unlike Gengar, you don't have weakness to Dark and Ghost on top of your Psychic weakness, so that's actually pretty good. There you go. You make Swampert cry. You see that? He's crying. It's okay, Swampert. It's important to be in touch with your emotions. So, and I would be crying too if somebody dodged my strongest move. In any case, being only weak to Psychic, which is hitting you on your lower special defense, which means that Weezing is not really incentivized to stay in versus, special attackers anyway. You're actually, pretty solid into the things that you most want to be walling, which is the physical attackers. You can be a pretty solid check to Pokemon that rely on the combination of ground, rock, bug, and fighting moves. This is not the comprehensive list. You could say like normal as well if you want to throw that in there. And there are not a lot of Pokemon that run like literally all four of these attacking types on one set, although there are some. But there are a lot of Pokemon that will have 3 of their 4 attacking moves in here, or they only have 3 attacking moves and it happens to be contained in this list. And here are some examples here, and they're all so mad about it, except for Hariyama, who is a stoic in a sense. It's kind of interesting that BKC loves Hariyama so much, but Hariyama is just a stoic dude, as I'm characterizing it on this slide. There's no lore that necessarily states that Hariyama is stoic, but I don't know. Because it doesn't have other sprites on the sprite repository that I look for these images on, I'm just gonna claim that it is. But yeah, a lot of these take BKC Tar for example, which is gonna be Rock Slide, Earthquake, Hidden Power Bug, Focus Punch on your Tyranitar. Weezing walls all of that. You're immune or resist all of those except for Rock Slide, and Rock Slide is definitely a problem. I will say though, it is only 75 base power, and if you're gonna get hit for neutral by only one of these moves, I guess Hidden Powered Bug would be the best, but Rock Slide would probably be the second best. So yeah, we'll keep that in mind as we go on to the next slide, and we're gonna talk about Pseudo Rock Resists. So what is a Pseudo Rock Resist? Glad you asked. Pseudo Rock Resists are referring to Pokemon that have good physical bulk and are neutral into rock moves, but they're not weak to any of ground, fighting, or bug. The reason why those 3 types is because, well, those are the more common coverage types of the rock type Pokemon in this tier. You could throw, in theory, you could throw normal in there, but no type is weak to normal, so, discount that. The purpose of a Pseudo Rock Resist is to help a primary Rock Resist with walling Tyranitar or Aerodactyl, and then like your examples of your primary rock resist would be like Swampert, Flygon, maybe like Claydol, maybe Donphan. Go watch my Donphan video. And yeah, like it is nice to have some additional support for these. The reason why is sometimes a team with only one rock resist is going to need to use that rock resist to do a lot of things. Like, for example, if you're up against a rock spam team, which is a team that has Tyranitar and, or like I should say physical Tyranitar and Aerodactyl, you're going to need your rock resist probably to handle both of those so that you don't lose a game to fast rock slide flinch chances, which is why rock resist are so important. The flinch chance, you're always one or two flinches away from losing a Pokemon if you are not a rock resist. So keep that in mind. But the other thing that I'm sort of dancing around is that sometimes your rock resist is going to need to help you out against other physical attackers like Metagross or potentially Snorlax, depending on how dire your situation is. So it is nice to have another Pokemon like the Pseudo rock resist that can help to handle your Tyranitar or Aerodactyl in certain situations in a game. So you can save HP for, say, like your Swampert to handle Metagross, or for your Swampert to handle the other of Tyranitar or Aerodactyl. In any case, the Pokemon that I would maybe classify as Pseudo rock resists would be Fortress, Skarmory, Milotic, Suicune, Dusclops, and Weezing. Now, this is not the fully comprehensive list. You could maybe make some arguments about a Pokemon like Starmie, although I would contend because it's weak to Bug, which is one of the most common coverage hidden powers on a rock-type Pokemon, that it's not really the best at being that pseudo rock resist for you, but like there are certainly some other Pokemon that could maybe qualify, but these are the ones that have really good defense stats that are not weak to any of the types mentioned above, and they also have some other traits that will help them out against the particular rock type attackers. I will say that the ones on the left, your Spikers, are a little bit worse in theory at being like dedicated rock counters. Fortress at least has super effective coverage to hit, say, Tyranitar. Hidden Power Bug and Earthquake are quite nice. For Aerodactyl, it's not so great. I guess you might have Zap Cannon, but there's just no chance in hell that an Aerodactyl is going to let you Zap Cannon it. Although, maybe there is a chance in hell. Maybe the Aerodactyl's like, oh, I'm just one Rock Slide flinch away from killing this Fortress, and then it gets hit with Zap Cannon, which would be really funny, and you should send me a replay if such a thing happens in one of your games. But Skarmory can also phase, which is quite nice for Tyranitar, who likes to DD up in the face of Skarmory, or at least DD up on a switch to Skarmory. And Skarmory generally will live 2+1 Rock Slides from Tyranitar, so that's quite nice to know. If you get flinched once, you still have an opportunity to get the phasing off. Now, if you get flinched twice, or if you get crit on the next one, not so great, but that's why these are pseudo like rock resistant. Why I don't think that they're sufficient at being the only sort of rock counter. That's why I mentioned the primary rock resist, which you're gonna need if you want to be solid into these rock spam type of teams. But I digress. Milotic, Suicune in the middle just have really good defense stats. As you probably know, they're not likely to die to a Tyranitar or an Aerodactyl if they're at full health, though they are, like many other Pokemon, like 2 or so flinches away from it being a problem. But at the very least, if they get to act, they have super effective Water Stab to sort of punish these Tyranitar and Aerodactyl for going for the 27% flinch chance, factoring in the chance that Rock Slide misses, of course. And then Dusclops and Weezing can threaten Will-O-Wisp, which is quite nice, but I would think you should probably have noticed across this team that Weezing is just particularly good at switching into something like Tyranitar because it is immune to ground and resists fighting and bugs, so it has a lot more entry points against Tyranitar. The only thing that Tyranitar can really do to deal any significant damage to Weezing would be to go for Rock Slide or Double Edge. And Double Edge is not the best option either, because you're not really going to break the Weezing with Double Edge. Yeah, probably could like 3 or 4 hit KO, maybe, depending on like whether you're like +1 or Choice Band or how much attack investment and blah blah blah. But like you're taking chip damage, and then Weezing is threatening to Will-O-Wisp you too. So I want to shout out Weezing in particular for being really good. And then it also, I mean, none of these Pokemon are weak to flying, which is the other common option that is run in Aerodactyl. But I think it is at least worth noting that Weezing is not weak to that either. So really, like they don't get a good move to hit Weezing in general. Unless they're going to run like HP Psychic, but that's crazy. So, yeah. But there's even more to Weezing that makes it really nice at just being a overall, like, good wall for physical Pokemon. And that is the access to the move Haze. Haze is not a very commonly seen move in this format, but it is really nice because it resets all stat changes. So, like, you could be really good at stopping the progress of a Curse Sweeper like Snorlax, or a Swords Dancer like Heracross, or even like a Dragon Dancer like Salamence. So that's really good. We're going to have a visual demonstration here, so pull your phone out of your pocket so you can see this, alright? So here we are. We have Weezing, and there's a Heracross here with ×2 attack. It just went for Swords Dance the previous turn. And now Weezing is going to blow that white smoke on him. Yeah, and then it causes that Heracross to sneeze. Would you look at that? And it lost its stat boost because it sneezed. That's my canon for what Haze does, is it makes the opposing Pokemon sneeze, and then it loses all of its stat boosts. I guess it also makes Weezing sneeze, and remove its Intimidate debuffs, I guess, if such things happen. That's a sort of like additional goodness that happens with Haze, but it's not so common that matters. In fact, against the common Intimidators, which would be Mence and Gyarados, you're probably just gonna Will-O-Wisp them anyway. It doesn't really matter what your attack stat is, but it could be nice to reset that debuff so that you can do a little bit more damage with your Sludge Bomb if you ever need to like just trade against them. So good to know. Weezing's best stab move, Sludge Bomb, has a 30% chance to poison, so that's really good for racking up extra damage on the non-steel types, or non-poison types, I guess, as well, that would switch in. So say for example, if Celebi comes in, it gets hit with a super effective Sludge Bomb, and you know, it's probably not going to do that much because Celebi is pretty bulky, but if you get a poison on it, you're going to get an extra 6% damage after factoring in the leftovers recovery. Or like you could even say 12% factoring in sand damage if sand is on the field. So that's not negligible. It means that a lot of times Celebi is going to have to recover a turn earlier, or it's going to have to switch, or if it doesn't have like any sort of recovery move, maybe it's CM3 attacks, then you know that's one less time that it could switch in to something else on your team, which is really, really important. So, like, I think Sludge Bomb is one of the best moves in Modern Generation and Gen 9 on things like, say, like Galarian Slowking. And I think that it is also good in this generation, although it's not quite as good because there's no Fairy type, and also a lot of the Pokemon that would really like to use Sludge Bomb, like Weezing, or sorry, not Weezing, Gengar and Venusaur, they're not so incentivized to do it because it's a physical attack in this generation, but that does kind of help Weezing because it uses Weezing's slightly higher physical attack. It's actually more impactful for a Pokemon like, say, Muck, who has a lot higher attack stat than it does special attack. So, yeah, we'll keep that in mind. Weezing's special attack stat is pretty decent at 85, so you could use Fire Blast to threaten a 2-hit KO or a 3-hit KO on Skarmory, depending on how much special attack investment you're willing to run. So that's quite nice. And then you have Explosion to threaten an Oko on Blissey, as well as just to smash into physical attackers that can't quite break you. So that could be good as well. With all this sort of utility, you would think like Weezing would be like an OU staple. Oh yeah, look at that. That's Skarm Bliss. Get out of here. We got the Fire Blast Explosion coverage for you. And that's sort of the concept behind the offensive Weezing set. I think I was going to say you wonder why Weezing is not more commonly seen in OU, but I guess maybe we'll touch on it after we look at some of these sets. In any case, this set here is probably your best at being that Skarm Bliss check, by virtue of the fact that you have a decently strong fire move to click. You have Haze. Probably not that consequential into Skarm Bliss in particular, but maybe it could be useful to click against Blissey in some case. I think probably Explosion would be better, but I digress. Will-O-Wisp is nice for sort of forcing in something like a Blissey, who would be the best at absorbing a Will-O-Wisp on a team that doesn't have a fire type. Granted, most teams don't have a fire type because fire is a little bit, I wouldn't say bad, but limited in its scope in this generation. And then, yeah, I mean, Sludge Bomb is just pretty solid to click. This has a lot of attack investment here, so you can get a lot of good damage into some neutral Pokemon, like say Snorlax or I don't know, like a Starmie that's switching in. In any case, the Smogon write-up for this says that the EV spread is somewhat complex. Yeah, tell me about it. But you're investing heavily into attack. You put 68 EVs into special attack to KO Skarmory and Heracross more easily, and then you dump the rest in HP so that Weezing can take a few hits here and there. So I don't know how well this set really holds up in the modern day. I think that there are some problems with it. For one, Skarmory runs a lot more SPDEF investment than it used to. I'm imagining that this got written up probably like 10 years ago, back in the days when Skarmory was more commonly running physical defense investment. But now that it runs more SPDEF, Weezing is going to have to run more SPATAC to get a 2-hit KO on Skarmory. Now, a 3-hit KO might suffice, but you would much rather 2-hit KO with a move that is inaccurate like Fire Blast than 3-hit KO. So, yeah, and then also when Protect and stuff like that is involved, 3-hit KOs are a lot less threatening to Skarmory than you might initially think. And then there are a few Pokemon in this tier that like really care about Weezing's attack investment this much. Like, yes, it gets a little bit of extra damage with that Sludge Bomb. It gets a little bit of extra damage with that Explosion. It might kill something that's not Blissey with Explosion that I'm not like immediately recognizing. But this is like a lot more than you need in order to kill a Blissey with Explosion. So I think with this set, you could probably stand to run a lot more special attack investment, because I think it's more important that you are slamming into that Skarmory rather than like neutral Sludge Bombs into God knows what. But in any case, I did have a sort of custom build. I mean, I would claim this Weezing set. I have not seen anybody else use this spread, so I'm claiming it. But if you watched my Regirock video, then you've probably seen that I have used Weezing before, and this is the spread that I used on it. So I'm not going to go into too much detail because I go into a little bit more detail on it in that video where I used the team that this Weezing is on. But suffice to say, with this much special attack investment, we're going to secure a 2-hit KO on Skarmory. 50-50 that we could 2-hit KO Celebi as well outside of Sand, which is kind of neat. Not super duper relevant because you don't generally want to stay in with Weezing against Celebi, but utility Celebi is one of the most common to drop Psychic, so you could maybe stay in and go for the Fire Blast, so could be an option. Although I should say that utility Celebi is very commonly going to run Recover, and if it is going to stay in versus the Weezing and it's not clicking Psychic, it's probably clicking Recover, so like take that with a sort of grain of salt. It's more to force the Celebi to recover as you go to something else on your team. And then you're going to 2-hit KO every Metagross set as well, which is really nice. You get kind of close to OHKOing after Spikes, depending on the Metagross, but generally just think about it as you're going to get a 2-hit KO. Hidden Power Grass is really good into defensive Pert. It's also a possibility that you could OHKO a no-bulk Swampert after Spikes damage. And then Explosion on this set with the, I know it looks weird, 40 EVs minus attack nature. But this is so that you deal 94% minimum to a modest Blissey, which means that you have a chance to just straight up kill it, but if you don't, then Sand will guarantee the KO. So that's quite nice. And then 168 speed is to outspeed a minus speed Claydol, and also to creep all of the defensively invested Swampert and Tyranitar. It's a little bit more than you need for that, generally speaking, but being able to outspeed a minus speed Claydol does have some benefit. You know, minus speed Claydol is going to have more special attack than utility Claydol does, which means that it has a stronger Psychic, which means that it might be able to get a KO on a weakened Weezing more easily than the utility Claydol. Not by much, because the special attacks are usually pretty similar, but it is a consideration, and if you are faster than it, then you could maybe boom on it before it does anything, or, you know, Hidden Power Grass, then boom, if you know for sure that you're faster, though it's a little hard to know, and so many people run the utility Claydol, which has more speed, so maybe a little bit niche. You could cut a little bit out of the speed if you want, go down to like say 162, 163, and then put more into your HP investment. That could be good. But in any case, this is just my sort of take, and you know, if you want to make some tweaks to it, you're not allowed to. I'm actually going to copyright strike you if you do. That's a joke. You can certainly make whatever edits you want. In any case, we're going to look at the defensive Weezing here. So this one's pretty simple with max HP and max defense investment. And then your sort of choice of Impish or Bull, depending on what coverage move you're running, whether it be Sludge Bomb, physical, or Flamethrower, which is special. This set notably does not run Boom, which I have been told by a good player that I do respect that every Weezing needs Boom, but I don't know if I necessarily agree with that take. I do think that it's a really nice move to have, and if you can fit it, then you should, but this defensive Weezing has some pretty good synergy between all of Haze, Will-O-Wisp, and Pain Split. So Weezing, as the Smogon writers say, is the best fighting type counter and Haze user in the game. I don't know if I would go so far to say all that. I do think fighting type counter, yes, because you're not weak to any of the hidden powers that a fighting type is going to run. And if they're running something crazy like Earthquake as well, you're going to be immune to that. So there are very few Pokemon that so thoroughly counter the fighting type. Like, yes, Gengar's really good at beating fighting types, but that's only if they don't have Hidden Power Ghost or Shadow Ball in the case of Medicham. So keep that in mind. Weezing is going to be a lot more consistent, just invariably against the fighting types. And then, yeah, this set is simple. That's what I said when I first saw it. The idea is that you're going to burn physical threats with Will-O-Wisp, Haze if they set up, and then wear them down with Sludge Bomb or Flamethrower. So I guess the sort of vision for this is that you're going to beat down a burned physical attacker that's just going to stay in and sack itself to you, which I don't think that's going to happen so commonly. Most people are not going to just give free turns like that. They're probably going to switch to something that can force the Weezing out. But if they do, you still have things like Will-O-Wisp and Pain Split, which can be really annoying for the Pokemon that switch in. Flamethrower, really nice to hit the Steel type. Sludge Bomb is really good into the non-poison immune Pokemon. I like poison the status, I should say, because you could get that poison chance. And even getting something like a poison on, say, like Tyranitar or Swampert, where you would probably rather get the Will-O-Wisp, is not bad, because you'll be chipping them out as well. And yeah, all these sand immune Pokemon who love to just chip heal up with their leftovers, you could say nah to them, as long as they're not a Steel type, of course. But yeah, that's kind of nice. They do want to note here that if a Steel or a Rock type has Substitute, then Weezing is going to run into some problems, but Flamethrower can help you deal with at least the Steel types that have Substitute. So, good to know. But I want to go a slightly different direction because I am a weirdo. And I want to use a set that is a little bit more novel. Why? Because that's my whole brand. Like, I'm using these weirdo sets. And this is the sort of idea that I came up with, is replacing Pain Split on the defensive Weezing set for Mimic. We'll discuss a little bit more in the particulars of Mimic in a moment, but I just want to note that Sludge Bomb here is going to deal 50% minimum to offensive Celebi and 82% minimum to Breloom, which is not super impressive, but that's okay because Weezing is not really designed to be a heavy damage dealer, at least not direct damage. So that's okay with me. The defensive investment is going to be a lot more important. So we do have some special defense investment here, and that is so that we can live a Modest Thunder from Zapdos or Fire Blast from Moltres. And we could also live a Psychic from a 76 special attack Celebi in the sand. I know that 76 special attack sounds like a random number to pull up for Celebi, but there are some Celebi sets that prefer to run high speed or high defensive investment and only run a little bit of special attack. I think just enough to making, like, I don't know, 2-hit KO a Gengar or something like that. In any case, we can survive that plus sand, which is not terrible. Granted, I don't know how much you're going to get out of surviving a Celebi Psychic. I guess you get to Sludge Bomb it, and if it doesn't have Recover for some reason, then that damage will stick. Or you can at least force it to recover, or you could try to Will-O-Wisp it or something. But in any case, yeah, against Zapdos and Moltres, not always the most impactful to live those, but you know, you can secure some Sludge Bomb damage, which can be nice. We're going to live 2 unboosted Metagross Meteor Mashes plus Sand. Good to know, because that means that we could come in versus a Metagross, eat a Meteor Mash, then take the next one, and then get our Will-O-Wisp off. Or vice versa, if Weezing comes in on Metagross not clicking Meteor Mash, like say it comes in on an Earthquake, you have the opportunity to burn its Lumberry and then burn again with Will-O-Wisp, or you have the opportunity to miss a Will-O-Wisp and not be completely screwed. So all of those things kind of just come together to be a little bit more consistent at spreading that burn on Metagross. We're also going to live 2 Choice Band HP Flyings from Mence plus Sand damage. Can be really nice at shutting down a CB Mence. If you get the the Will-O-Wisp off on them, that's really good. But notably, you know, CB is the same as a +1 boost from Dragon Dance. So if they have Dragon Dance up, then you could go for, say, a Will-O-Wisp. If you miss, you have a chance to go for it again, or you could just simply haze, and now you're at least not dealing with a +1 Mence when Weezing gets sacked off inevitably here. So, good to know. And then finally, we're going to live a +4 Rock Slide from a Jolly DD Tar plus Sand. Adamant +4 Rock Slide would be a roll. And I know that +4 Rock Slide, it's like, why do you care so much about that? But that's just to sort of highlight how good Weezing is at taking on a Tyranitar. Yes, Double Edge would do slightly more than Rock Slide, but not every Tyranitar is going to run Double Edge, so keep that in mind. And then Mimic. The idea with Mimic is that you'll steal the last used move of your opponent, and you have 5 uses of that move until you switch out. Once you switch out, you will lose that move and you will get Mimic back. So that kind of can matter in some contexts where maybe you're going to use Mimic to PP stall a really passive team, or you're going to use Mimic to, say, get a really good move that you want, say like Spikes. And just to know, you will only have 5 uses of Spikes, which is plenty enough, but not necessarily enough to beat a Rapid Spinner who's just going to Rapid Spin in front of you. And also not necessarily the best if your plan is to switch out and then say, okay, I just have Spikes on Weezing for the rest of the game, because that's not how it works. So, yeah, keep those in mind. The speed investment here is just to speed creep these low investment Swampert and Tyranitar. I would say 161 is probably the most that Tyranitar is going to run, because otherwise you're going to have to cut into your attack or your defensive investment, in which case they could go a lot higher with their speed. They're not going to go to 163. They could go to 168 to try to outspeed, say, Claydol with a minus speed nature, but more commonly they're going to go even faster than that, like 179 to outspeed things like Skarmory and bulky Metagross. So I'm not willing to run that high a speed stat, so we're just going to stick at 162, which should get you past all of the Swampert and Tyranitar who are not like intentionally investing a lot in their speed. So good to know, because you can get that faster Will-O-Wisp off. That's really the important thing. So yeah. Also, I don't know if any of you guys watch anime. Probably you do, because there's a lot of overlap between Pokemon and anime fans. But that's FireRed in a Mimic chest there. Kind of cool. I love that show. It's a really good show. You should watch it if you haven't. But let's talk about the team structure. So this 6 I got from a team dump from a player called, I hope I pronounce this right, Ibidium. This is something that you could find on the Smogon forums. It's not that hard, but I saw this 6 and I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And then I looked at the sets of them and I was like, I want to make some changes. And one of the changes, of course, that I made was this Mimic Weezing with a little bit of Spadef investment. So the idea here with this team is that we're special offense, but special offense can sometimes struggle with having more than one answer to a rock spam team, and also fitting spikes. So Weezing is like a little bit of a compression of those two roles. Not exactly, because, well, I mean, if they don't have Skarmory, or if they don't let you mimic the spikes, then you don't really have a spiker, so keep that in mind. And Weezing is not, like, the most sturdy rock resist that ever existed. Of course, it's not even a rock resist at all, but it is really good at beating physical Tyranitar, so that can free you up to allow Claydol to be more dedicated towards Aerodactyl in that particular matchup. So, yeah, keep that in mind. We have a lead Rest Zap with HP Ice, so we can start the game really well versus Salamence and Suicune leads, and then, despite the fact that we have Zap Doug for this team, I think I would recommend that you switch to Weezing turn 1 versus a lead Tyranitar, so that you are not playing around with the Tyranitar going for some crazy move like Focus Punch to hit your Dugtrio. And you can also sort of save some Zapdos and Dugtrio HP for later on in the game in case you need it. I will admit the Dugtrio spread that I'm using here is the one from Ibedium's team, which has a lot less attack investment than I generally would run on Dugtrio, and we don't have beat up on it either, which could definitely be an option for you if you want to use that. This team has decent enough physical attackers for a special offense team that your beat up is not going to be that significantly weak, but just note that Zapdos is not, we don't have like a baton pass Zapdos, so it's not like the most consistent at getting that Blissey trap early on in a game. You'll have to be a little bit more creative to get there. And then maybe there's an argument that you use Explosion on Weezing to better facilitate that sort of trap with the Dugtrio, although, you know what, Weezing's Explosion should usually kill Blissey anyway, so if you want to use Explosion on Weezing, be my guest. You could run a minus speed nature. Or actually, you don't even need to run a minus speed nature because we have no special attacks on this. So that's plenty fine. And you don't really need any attack investment at all to be good into Blissey. So, yeah. So already talking about changing this team as we're describing it. But that's why I'm here, is to provide you these sort of resources to make your own spin on certain teams. You don't always have to run exactly the team pace that I put in the description. In fact, most of the people who have commented telling me that their teams were successful, they probably changed one or two things to get that success they did. In any case, we have a CM Refs Talk Suicune and a CM Wish Jirachi as our sort of win cons. I guess when I was in this team building phase for the more recent teams that I had, as I've been in this sort of kick with CM Wish Jirachi for whatever reason. This is a good set though, so we keep that in the back pocket there. Dugtrio is good at revenge killing Tyranitar, Blissey, and sometimes Metagross. All three of which are a little bit tricky for this team to handle, but not impossible to navigate. Metagross maybe a little less so, at least defensively, but offensively it can be a little bit daunting because say it gets a nice Meteor Mash into one of your non-steel resists, and then threatens to boom on the switch to one of your steel resists. Like, that could be not so good. But Weezing, of course, is going to spread burns to the physical attackers. You can haze against physical boosters in case you need that extra little bit of support. Maybe you're up against something like DD Refresh Salamence, which was a little popular a few weeks ago. I don't know why. It really pissed me off when I was trying to use Moltres. Not for a video per se, but I think actually maybe for a video. I think that was when I was playing with El Plastico. But in any case. And we're going to try to mimic spikes from Skarmory or Fortress to set our own layers. So that is all I really have to say about Weezing. And of course, we're going to get into the battles here. So enough of that Pokemon Mansion. Sometimes that could be a little grating. I hope that wasn't so bad for you guys. I hope that it was just nice background music. But we're going to listen to some really nice background music here. This is Sky Peak Forest from Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky, which you might think, what does that have anything to do with Weezing at all? But I'm imploring you that you need to go play the game. In fact, actually, I might be a fake fan because I know that Muck is definitely a lot more prevalent in that dungeon than Weezing. I actually can't even quite remember if Weezing is there, but you know what? I support Muck Erasure. It's not Muck Monday anymore, ladies and gentlemen. It's Weezing Wednesday. So let's get into this game. Lead Salamence, most likely going to be Choice Band or mixed. Probably mixed if it's not feeling froggy enough to stand versus Zapdos, but in any case, They do reveal my HP Ice, which would have been really bad for Salamence either way, but I can simply go to Weezing, who comes in on a Focus Punch and takes 19%, so get bent, Tyranitar. I can simply go for a Will-O-Wisp as they switch to Celebi. Probably the best case scenario for them to take a Will-O-Wisp on, but still get some chip damage, and then I go to Dugtrio. So, the idea with Dugtrio there, if they go for Recover, then I could still nail some damage on them with HP Bug. Based on the damage that I did with my Zapdos, they seem to be a little bit more on the defensive side with their Celebi, which means that maybe, possibly, they don't have a Grass-type move. But in any case, I do think that it's not so bad to switch to Dugtrio here, because most likely what the Celebi would have done if it stayed in was click Psychic to beat the Weezing down. And Dugtrio, I was very confident would live the Psychic. So I come in, and now the Celebi's trapped, and I can remove it with Hidden Power, which is very good for my Weezing. Then I can go back to Weezing here on Skarmory because, I mean, well, I can't really stop the Skarmory for getting a Spike Up. Even if I went to Zapdos, I mean, they're inevitably just going to switch to whatever their Electric Resist is, assuming they have another one other than Celebi, or just Tyranitar, who's not going to take that much from an uninvested Zapdos. But if they start going for Spikes, and I go to Weezing, then potentially I could get my Mimic off. And they do go for another Spike, and I get my Mimic. So now I have Spikes for 5 PP. They can get their third layer up, and I'm going to get one layer up myself. So I don't know what their team is. Could be any number of things. I decided to go for a Will-O-Wisp. Would be good to catch, say, Salamence coming in. Maybe it's a Mixments, but it's still good to get that damage off. Or if they have a spinner, like, say, a Claydol, then I can catch that as well. Starmie maybe would have not been so great. Getting the second Spike, to me, didn't seem all that worth it, but I guess if they have a team that has no hazard removal at all, maybe they're like a Skarm Mag team, which could make some sense with the Celebi and the Salamence being there. Then, yeah, maybe that second Spike could have been more valuable. But in any case, I've missed my Will-O-Wisp on the Skarmory, and I get roared out for my trouble. So now my Weezing does not have Spikes, and I'm probably not going to be able to get Spikes again, because unless I am able to spin with my Claydol, but probably won't be so fortunate. With Suicune, I can just go for a Surf. Modest Surf is going to do a pretty sizable chunk to the Skarmory, threatening the 3-hit KO. In any case, my opponent is going to reveal Swampert, who should handle my Zapdos pretty well, except I have Toxic, and they have Ice Beam. Ice Beam Refresh is not impossible on Swampert, but it's not quite as common. This is most likely going to be a standard defensive pert, possibly offensive pert, but I think offensive pert would do a little bit more damage than that. To my Spadef Zapdos? Maybe not, I'm not sure. I don't know my head calcs like that. In any case, Suicune is going to come in, and I'm going to rest on the Skarmory, predicting it to go for Protect, and at least I could burn a rest turn. But it actually doesn't go for Protect, it goes for Drill Peck. In any case, I can go for a Sleep Talk there. If I got Surf, I would have put the Skarmory really low, but I didn't, and I get roared out, so now my Suicune, of course, is going to have 2 turns to wake up still when it comes in. Keep that in mind when you're using things like Sleep Talk on your Pokemon. Not going to be able to do much to the Pert. It actually does reveal to be Curse Pert, so a little bit offensive. Probably not a lot of special attack investment, if any, but that's kind of scary. And with my Suicune, I decide, well, the best thing I could do probably is go for Sleep Talk and try to get a Surf off. I got one Surf off, and then I get a second Surf off, so that's pretty lucky for me. But there are some other configurations that would have helped. If I got Calm Mind into Surf, that would have equally been good. But one Surf would probably have been fine, because I could at least threaten to kill it with something else on my team. The Aerodactyl comes in. I'm going to sack Suicune and then get the free spin with my Claydol. So now we're back to just one Spike on the field, which is really nice for my team. Granted, I do have 3 Spike immunities, and you could argue that since I have Claydol, this could be a Superman team, maybe, but I wouldn't necessarily argue that point. In particular, I think that the fact that I'm using spin and I don't have a consistent spiker myself is probably disqualifies this team from being Superman, but it has some Superman-like qualities. So, in any case, I'm just going to play pretty safe around this Tyranitar, sack my Doug trio to allow my Jirachi to come in and set up a Calm Mind and a Wish. And this is just a nightmare scenario for this Tyranitar. As I can go for another Calm Mind. Can't really do anything about it. Skarmory will come in, but I'm +2 with Fire Punch, so see ya, Skarm. And then Aerodactyl can come in, but I have a lot of defense investment, so I'm going to tank this Earthquake quite nicely. I go for Psychic, and I don't kill! So there you go. Maybe you might want to run a little bit more special attack on your Jirachi when you play this team, but it's not so bad. In any case, this is a rare opportunity for me to go for Sludge Bomb. I get a little bit of damage on Tyranitar, not really much. And then I will opt to go to Claydol, who I think is going to be a little more threatening to whatever comes in, like the Salamence, than Claydol would be. It reveals to be a Pump Salamence, which is kind of cool, and I go for Explosion, which doesn't quite kill the Salamence, but that's fine. I take the Dragon Claw, not as well as I thought I would because I get crit, but at the very least I don't die, so that's nice. And then Zapdos is going to at least be able to see what Aerodactyl locks into. We're going to go to Weezing here. Yes, Jirachi would probably be a little bit more consistent. I know, well, it's at 45%. I don't know. It probably still would have lived 2 Rock Slides, so not the worst. But I go to Weezing, of course, because the featured Mon has to get the win. And yeah, I hope that sort of highlights how good Weezing is into Rock Spam teams, or at least Aerodactyl plus Tyranitar. But it was also really nice at getting that. Well, it didn't get a Wisp off on Pert, but it would have been decent into this Curse Swampert, though. I assume actually it probably had Hydro Pump as its last move, so maybe it wouldn't have been as nice as maybe if this was like a Rest Swampert or something. But kind of interestingly, maybe I could have mimicked the Curse on the Swampert. Probably not worth it at all, but could have been funny. In any case, we're going to go on to the next game here. Zapdos versus Lead Tyranitar. As I suggest, you should just go Weezing here. If they are a mixed Tar, they're going to go for Ice Beam into a Zapdos. So and that could be a decent chunk of damage into Weezing, and you're basically going to be forced to switch, but it's not the worst thing in the world. If they're a Pursuit Tar, they could go for Crunch, although I don't know if Pursuit Tar generally wants to stay in versus Zapdos. But in any case, Crunch is basically the worst case scenario if you're going to go for the Weezing switch, but Crunch should usually do about 50%. Sometimes it gets a low enough roll that you could live the next Crunch. You probably won't live after Sand damage, but that is a perk of having this little bit of Spadef investment. You could maybe even do a little bit more if you want to be better into a Crunch from Tyranitar, but I wouldn't necessarily suggest it because like you definitely want to have some high defense investment to be good into the other physical attackers. In any case, they missed their Rock Slide, which is maybe a little bit consequential, but we'll see. I go for a Will-O-Wisp and burn their Lumberry. They go for Rock Slide, do a solid 41% as I miss my next Will-O-Wisp. Not so good. And then they hit their next Rock Slide. Don't get a flinch though, and I get my Will-O-Wisp off. So a little bit dicey there, and had they hit their first Rock Slide, I probably would have lost my Weezing for not a lot of gain there. But if the situation was a little different, I could have went for Haze, which not as good as getting the burn on Tyranitar, but like at least it stops me from just straight up losing to DD-Tar. Although I do have some sort of counterplays there. But getting a burn on this Tyranitar means that now Claydol is going to be a little bit more of a an answer to the Tyranitar, even if it has HP bug, so that's good for me. There's no sense in sacking my Weezing here. I can just go to Claydol, who should take a Rock Slide very, very nicely. And now I'm threatening to Earthquake. But I'm going to go hard Dugtrio. Why did I go hard Dugtrio there, you might ask? I don't know, in case they were going something that was weak to Dugtrio, like Celebi or something. It was kind of an aggressive play, but I don't get super duper punished for it because the Skarmory will come in. It goes for Spike, and I could go for the Mimic play. But they switched to freaking Tyranitar. But I kind of anticipated that such a thing might happen, that they might switch. Because if they don't have Drill Peck, if they have Drill Peck, they're going to go for it. And if they don't have Drill Peck, it's not guaranteed that they would go for Spike. And if they do go for the second layer anyway, then they're probably just going to get the third layer. So I could maybe Mimic then. So I go for Will-O-Wisp because that would be really good to hit on the Skarmory, and if they go to anything else, I could burn that. But they instead go to Tyranitar, which is whatever. But now I can go to Dugtrio, who would take absolutely nothing from that Rock Slide, and now we don't have to deal with this stupid Tyranitar anymore. Skarmory is the switch back in. I will go back to Weezing. And I've already revealed, or I haven't already revealed Mimic, but I can try to go for it again here. And they switch to Moltres. Okay, that's not great. That covered Will-O-Wisp, which, yeah, maybe makes some sense. I could have maybe went for a Sludge Bomb predicting that, but it would have been hard to predict the Moltres coming in. In any case, they're going to go for a Hidden Power Grass, do a solid 41% to me, but I will hit back for a really solid 100% with Surf. Maybe they thought that I was not a high special attack investment Suicune and they could win the 1v1, but I do happen to be a max special attack Suicune, so no dice for you, pal. I will sack Weezing off to this Gengar because it's probably not going to be able to do much for me going into this game. And I'm going to call Mind against the Gengar. It goes for Will-O-Wisp, which is not ideal for me, but depending on what this team has, I might be able to stomach that Will-O-Wisp and win the game anyway. But they revealed to have a Blissey, which is making this team look a lot like a Big Five with Moltres, which is not great. But I don't necessarily have to switch out versus the Blissey. Yes, it stalls my progress, but if it can't beat me, and it goes for Ice Beam there, so don't know if it didn't have a better move to click, but I can simply just stay in and take that. I get roared out into the Claydol, who I'm going to Rapid Spin with against the Skarmory as it goes for Toxic. It unfortunately misses, which means that I can go to my Jirachi. Skarmory can get another Spike up if it wants to, but I can punish it with a Fire Punch. If I get a burn, then it's over for the Skarmory. But instead, we're going to see a switch to Swampert. I'm going to go to Claydol, anticipating a Ground-type move, which is maybe a little dumb. I've had a whole Zapdos to switch into, but I guess my Zapdos doesn't really beat Swampert one-on-one because I don't have HP Grass, but they don't know that, so could have maybe tried that. In any case, I am going to go to Suicune, because I am baiting the Surf, so, I mean, you're not clicking Earthquake into Claydol, which allows me to get my rest off, and now I can go for a Sleep Talk, and I critical hit a Surf into Skarmory, which is very fortunate for me. Although, as long as I rolled Surf, I would have forced that Skarmory to have to go for Protect, which means that I had an opportunity maybe to get a Calm Mind off my Sleep Talk, and if not, the next Surf when I wake up should kill, forcing a switch to Blissey. In any case, we're just going to go back to the Suicune here, who, of course, is going to have to burn 2 more turns of sleep if I want that. But I am going to then pivot to Zapdos on the Earthquake. Pretty nice for me. I'm going to go for Toxic. Now, this thing has revealed Surf, Protect, and Earthquake, so I'm guessing that its last move is Ice Beam, meaning it doesn't have Refresh, meaning that I probably am just fine to get a Toxic off and eventually beat the Swampert, but I will get a Toxic on Blissey instead, which is not bad for me. It's going to put the Blissey on a timer. We're going to force a switch out versus our Jirachi here, which is quite nice because we can nail something with a Psychic. We'll see if I go for that. That is in fact what I go for. 30% chip on Swampert, not inconsequential at all. I'm gonna go for another Psychic as they go for Surf. Maybe a little bit of a risky play on my part because Earthquake would have done a pretty significant amount of damage, but given that they have Protect and they were this low, I am going to go for a Wish and then Psychic as the Swampert kills me. What that affords me is the opportunity to go to Suicune and get all my HP back, so that's really nice. Going to be really good for potentially beating down the Gengar if that comes in. I am going to Sleep Talk, I get Surf, deal an okay 18% into the Blissey. I'm just going to stay in, because as long as this isn't a Calm Mind Blissey, then I should be okay. And even if it is, I do have Explosion on Claydol and Dugtrio to follow up in case we need it. I get hit with a Thunderbolt and it crits. Not great. I am just going to Calm Mind up again, though, because I should live another Thunderbolt as long as it doesn't crit. Could be a little scary. I could have got paralyzed there, and that would have ended my whole Suicune. But now I can go for Rest. Now that I'm at +2 special defense, I'm not that scared of Gengar, so I'm just going to go for a Sleep Talk. They go for Taunt, which stops me from being able to Sleep Talk, but that's okay because I just burned a turn of Sleep and didn't take any damage for it. So I'm just going to stay in, burn the second turn of Sleep, and now Suicune's going to wake up on the next turn. They go for Thunderbolt. They don't get a critical hit, so they're going to get hit with a Surf, and they're going to die because of Sand. And yeah, it's looking kind of over. This is potentially a Calm Mind Blissey, but if it was, it probably should have went for it by now. So I'm kind of fine to just boost up with my Suicune and win the game here. I mean, this is a foregone conclusion. You know what's about to happen. Yeah, Blissey's dead. Swampert cannot come in and win this game at all. So we are in a great spot here. So thank you to our modest Rest Talk Suicune for being an absolute G in this match. Weezing did a decent job at least burning the Tyranitar. It didn't get as much value as I was hoping for it. If I had gotten a Spike up, that would have been fantastic versus this team. But alas, it wasn't meant to be. But you can't blame a guy for trying. Lead Zapdos versus Zapdos. As they switch to Regice, which is interesting. It makes me think it might be one of my teams, because who the hell else is using Zapdos and Regice on ladder? I mean, that's not true. Plenty of people are, or plenty of people have, at least in the past. I don't know about still are, but in any case, I have my Suicune to switch into this Regice. I will go for a Calm Mind, as that will help me take less damage from the Thunderbolt. I can simply go for another Calm Mind, as they go for Thunder Wave. And then I think I could go for Rest here, but they decide to Boom, which is probably smart. Their best opportunity to get the Boom on the Suicune, and it keeps me from being able to rest up. So now Zapdos comes in and I'm forced to go to Cloyster. I make a hard switch to Jirachi, predicting that they would go... I don't know exactly what I was predicting that they would go, but I didn't think they would stay in with Zapdos versus the Claydol, and Jirachi could build me some momentum. And they happen to go to Cloyster, and that's perfect, because Jirachi is definitely going to scare the Cloyster out, because if I have Thunderbolt, like, there's just no way that Cloyster wants to stay in and take that. So I'm going to go for a Calm Mind here as Swampert switches in, and then, not wanting to take the Earthquake damage, I am going to end up with Weezing in here. I go for Will-O-Wisp because that could cripple the Swampert and allow for my Jirachi to win the game. But the Cloyster is in, and it goes for Spikes, which is an opportunity for me to mimic and get my own Spikes up. And then I'm going to hard switch to Jirachi. So the concept there, why did I do that instead of just get more Spikes up? Well, the problem is Cloyster has... or potentially has Rapid Spin. So if it goes for Rapid Spin against my Weezing and spams that, I am going to run out of Spikes before the Cloyster runs out of Rapid Spins, obviously. And Cloyster is healthy enough that it's not going to die to burn over the course of 5 turns. And I'm not going to be able to get my spike back up with Weezing because there's just no chance that the Cloyster is going to go for spikes versus the Weezing again. It's probably going to go for Surf anytime the Weezing is in. So Jirachi is the best play that I could make to punish a Surf from, or sorry, a Rapid Spin from the Cloyster. Yes, Zapdos would have been nice because it threatens to kill the Cloyster, but the Cloyster is just going to switch out. At least when I have the Jirachi in, I can get a Calm Mind off. And that is what I'm going to attempt to do. In fact, the Cloyster is going to switch out. At this stage, I am going to go for a Psychic with my Jirachi, and that takes a lot of damage, so this seems to be an offensive Swampert. So I can simply go for Psychic again. They're going to sack off the Cloyster and then use that as a Dugtrio entry, so they're kind of like a special offense Spike Stack team with Cloyster, which is kind of cool. But good for me is that I can go to Claydol and threaten the spin, and now I know that on a Cloyster team, you're going to have a Gengar. And the last Mon, unrevealed, it's got to be Gengar. And you worked so hard to get all three of these layers up. You lost most of your Swampert and your entire Cloyster to do it. You're going to protect these spikes with your goddamn life. So I'm going to go for Psychic, predicting a Gengar switch. And I do manage to catch it. And at this stage, I'm like, well, yeah, this Gengar could go for Destiny Bond or something like that. But I think I'd rather just go up in this scenario here, given that I still have two Spike Immune Pokemon, so I'm kind of fine. Dugtrio comes in, and that's not going to be able to stop me from removing these spikes. Unless it got a crit with that hidden power, but yeah, no, I'm too bulky for that. So, it's not happening. And that's simply just a loss right there. I can switch the Claydol out into like Zapdos. Zapdos is going to eventually, it's just going to force a win basically. I go for HP Ice. There's not a great switch into that. And then as this Zapdos dies, we can eventually just win the game with our unrevealed Pokemon, who I know I've just built this team, but I can't remember what it was. In any case, this is the last game here. I think this is my highest rated opponent for the day. I played this guy a few times actually on this day using this team. I think we split some games, but he used something different here, and that different thing is a Curse Jolteon lead. I don't think I've ever seen that before. But okay. I know that this has got to be a baton pass idea, so I'm going to go to Weezing here, as though Jolteon goes for another Curse. Now that the Jolteon is -2 speed, I think Weezing is maybe faster, but it's not, though. As Medicham comes in with a White Herb to deal with that, how should I say that, lack of speed. Very cool idea, but I happen to have a Weezing that hazes and just stops that Medicham from being able to do anything. Since Sand is not up and Medicham is a fighting type, like its best move to hit me really is like Focus Punch or like Rock Slide or Shadow Ball, which is not going to do enough, and I'm going to get Leftovers healing to chip into that, so I can simply just keep Sludge Bombing. As the Jolteon is in, I don't want to take Thunderbolt damage on Weezing, so I switch to Claydol as they switch to a Curse White Herb Aerodactyl. Very weird. I don't know if I've ever seen a Curse spam team like this. In any case, I am going to boom my Claydol because it is my really my only check to Aerodactyl. And, you know, taking that Double Edge, I'm not going to be able to be a very good check to it in the future. So I'd rather just get that explosion damage and then get the Suicune in. Suicune, of course, is a pseudo rock resist of sorts. So, and I'm threatening to get the kill with Surf here. So I can force this Aerodactyl out or kill it as long as I don't get completely haxed. And I don't. So, very nice. Snorlax is going to come in. I'm going to Calm Mind in the face of the Snorlax. Potentially force it to boom, and if not, I can go for Rest and kind of beat it down from here. If it was a Curse Lax, then I could go to Weezing and get the burn on it. not the worst case scenario for me. And I could also mimic the curse, and then actually, it's not so bad, a check to that sort of Snorlax, because I can get 5 curse boosts, and then I'm going to be kind of Sludge Bomb, Will-O-Wisping into the Snorlax, forcing it to rest eventually, or forcing it to, like, yeah, rest eventually. I could even haze it if I want to. There's a lot of options there. In any case, I am going to force the Snorlax to blow up. I think that that's fine. I'd rather trade the Suicune for the Snorlax than keep the Suicune to beat, like, this Medicham, because I don't think I need it necessarily for that. And whatever the rest of his team is, it's probably some, like, Fizz offense team, and Weezing is going to be really solid into that. So I switch Weezing in against a Metagross, and I'm thinking to myself, well, Weezing is so important for checking Medicham that this person has to go for something that's going to destroy the Weezing, which on Metagross is either going to be Psychic or Explosion, and Jirachi covers both of those. It happens to be Explosion, which is probably what I was expecting. I could stay in with my Jirachi. I think I would have actually lived a Brick Break from Medicham. Maybe. It might have depended on whether it's Adamant or not, but I get crit. No matter, though, because I can go to Dugtrio, who traps the Medicham and kills it with Earthquake. Very nice. Last mon, Tyranitar. Exactly what you don't want to see. Switching into your Dugtrio. Of course, that's a joke. I'd love to see that, in fact. And I can go to Weezing here, who is going to basically clean up the Tyranitar with Sludge Bomb. It also catches Jolteon switching in. I am going to go to my Zapdos to not get Thunder Waved. That's very important. And then Tyranitar is in. Goes for Rock Slide. Gets Parrot Flinch chance there, but doesn't get either, and I break through and Thunderbolt. And I figured that it was better for me to Thunderbolt, because the worst case scenario for me is if Tyranitar gets a bunch of DDs off. Maybe there's an argument that I should have just went hard to Weezing, because Weezing is going to be better at stopping that sort of DD idea, but 75% of the time I should be able to get my T-Bolt off if they go for Dragon Dance, and that would have won the game. So I'm not mad about taking a 75% chance to win the game, and I don't think anybody else should be either. So there you go. And that is going to conclude it for this Weezing video. I hope that this is something that you've never seen before, and that you have been inspired and you're in awe of the excellence of Mimic Weezing. Because, you know, Weezing being so commonly requested, I knew I had to do something kind of crazy, and yeah, that offensive Weezing I do think is quite nice and is a good set in its own right, but you know, I'm not going to recycle Weezing sets here. I'm going to try to make another team, and while I can't take credit for this team exactly, because most of this idea was Ibedium's, I did make some changes, of course, to some spreads, but for the most part, it's Ibedium's team. It's the same 6. Same sort of concept, but I figured that there was an opportunity here to do something kind of cool with Weezing, with that Mimic. So, yeah, I hope you guys like that. And yeah, at the risk of rambling on any longer, I'm going to cut the video here. So we'll see you all for the next video, and happy Weezing Wednesday.